Hey, Courage, dear heart. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you're in here. Anybody want to start us off with some questions? If not, what would you like? Thank you so much for the gifts and the hearts. I appreciate that. Love the topics. Yeah, it seems like this has definitely become a place where we're really focusing on items or subjects or issues to help you with your deconstructing journey, specifically to just unpacking some of those indoctrinated beliefs, how they've impacted you, how it prevents you from showing up in your life. Because when you start letting go of those indoctrinated beliefs, who are you? What if you're not what the church says you are? Who are you if you no longer believe what you were compelled or forced to believe almost your entire life? So those seem to be the conversation. Those seem to be the topics that we talk about most. Cortana, that's a good question. When you say deconstructing, how far have others gotten? I think that how are you celebrating Pride? Well, I've done a couple of videos, and I'll come back to that question. I want to talk about Cortana's. When you say deconstructing, how far have others gotten? Well, there are people here who can tell you how far they've gotten on their deconstructing journey, but I also encourage people when you're talking about deconstructing and decolonizing, because it's very important that those kinds of things go together, because for many of us, this someone can't pray me away Sam's question. I think, hi Sam, I hope you're doing well. I think I've talked to you before. Those two go hand in hand, because for the modern American evangelical Christian experience, it's rooted in white supremacy. And we don't even realize how much that has impacted our lives, but we are holding on to many of those indoctrinated beliefs. And of course, it's going, it's going to impact how we show up in the world. Stephanie says, what is imposter syndrome and how does this show up in deconstruction? Should I just share our conversation from 10 minutes ago? I would never do that. I'm just kidding. But that is a great question. Grab Stephanie's as well. So for deconstructing, it's for me, and different people will say different things, but for me, deconstructing is like a lifetime journey. Especially when you have my skin color, you are always going to find places where some of those indoctrinated beliefs are hiding. And it impacts how you view the world, how you view others, how you show up in the world. Because when we were indoctrinated into this high control, evangelical, fundamentalist, conservative Christianity, we had this belief in that we were part of this exclusive Christian club, as one of my friends called it one time to me. Floored me when she said it, but because I had no idea that's the way people saw my faith. I had no idea. I just thought, everybody wants to be a part of what we are. Everybody wants a part of this good news, without realizing that it created an arrogance and a closed-mindedness. But when you're in it, sometimes you can't see it. And when you've lived your entire life surrounded by that, not only in your church life, but in your family life and in your education, that's a lot to unpack. So when you make a commitment to continually check yourself, continually improve and unpack and untangle from some of those beliefs, then it's something that you just make a commitment that you're going to always look within and see what you're still holding on to. Wings of a Magpie says, I have started calling it decolonization instead of deconstruction. I think that's really good. I do see them as they're very much integrated, and you're holding on to the part of the decolonization could signal that your deconstructing is changing and that you're ready to focus on the decolonizing, because you're ready to understand how much of your experience and your privilege and your lived experience has been impacted by the color of your skin and how it has impacted you. So you're ready to start really unpack that and learn, especially from so many Black creators here, creating educational spaces for you to go in and learn that. So make sure that if you're not doing it here on TikTok, that you find those people. I have a list. I don't know if we have them somewhere where we can grab those, but if not, I know we can find them. CB Train, who are you talking about? I don't know. Don't mute them yet. Did I miss a conversation? Thank you, Rev Karla Shop. I don't know what we're talking about there. Yes, thank you for the reminder to tap, tap, tap. All right, so Stephanie mentioned something about imposter syndrome, and I think that's a really, really, Jesus was a person of color communist. He was woke. Pretty much. What is imposter syndrome? Danielle, I'm not Muslim. I do have some followers who benefit from some of what I'm talking about, but I can't focus on just traditional or the teachings of Islam because I'm not Muslim. But obviously there are people who are deconstructing from all kinds of organized religion. So I would say that, yes, that people are deconstructing and reconstructing how they show up in the world. All right, I'm trying to get to this, but I'm not very organized today. So what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is when you're in a place of your genius or your expertise, but all of a sudden you feel like a fake. So I'm going to make this anecdotally because I certainly deal with it all the time, so I'll give you examples. Even being in the space when an agent reached out to me and then I was offered a book deal, feeling like I didn't deserve that because was I able to write a book? Is anybody going to buy it? I don't belong in this space. And oftentimes people who have been involved in high control religion experiences will carry a lot of imposter syndrome, especially when it's rooted in religious patriarchy or any type of patriarchal experience, because the focus of those kinds of structures is for you to always use your gifts to benefit the structure. So your indoctrination teaches you that unless your gifts are strengthening your church or your spiritual community, then you're wasting your talents. You're wasting, how many of you heard about your time and your talents and using them for God? And the way that was defined was how you used it to benefit the church. And how many of you heard, I don't know how many times I would hear, careful, Sister Karla, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't let your ego get ahead of you. Something good happened in your life, or you were recognized in some way. You would immediately be taken down because they did not ever want you to see yourself as successful or independent of the church. So then all of a sudden you come out of that structure and you're living your best life out here, and you're deconstructing from those indoctrinated beliefs, but boom, something really good happens in your life, and all of a sudden you're slapped with imposter syndrome when you realize that you're dealing with that indoctrinated belief again. And that's probably one of the hardest ones to deconstruct from. It'll show up at certain times because that lack of self-worth, that those feelings of shame and guilt and unworthiness that almost felt normal. If you weren't feeling shame and guilt and lack of self-worth in some way because you only were worthy when you were the good Christian, then that was defined by what church leaders said about you and how they then, as the interpreters of what God wanted in your life, they were the ones who were basically approving of your behavior, your attitude, your actions, all of that stuff. Well, when you no longer have those voices in your head and you're out here with good things happening in your life, then you then don't know what to do with yourself when you're happy. and you're at peace and you're actually getting the things that you want, that you deserve, because you're working hard and you're talented. So then you start to contort yourself seeking approval from some unknown people because of imposter syndrome, because those little voices are still in your head. And so it's really important that you talk to other people so that you get a better sense of what's happening, instead of you diving into this that this is real, that voice inside your head is real, that you actually dive into that and think, well, I'm not worthy, I'm just going to give up. And that stuff is hard. I don't know how many times I've dealt with it, even just since being on social media. Because it sometimes feels normal when people will, especially at the beginning, when some of my videos started going viral, I felt like I had to defend myself for being in this space, as if the community and the culture and the influence of social media wasn't enough, that people didn't take you seriously because you were a creator on social media. And I felt like I was constantly defending myself. I don't do that. I don't do that anymore. I don't do that anymore. Did we, is that good? Did that answer your question, Stephanie? Are you still here? Or did you go record? Any questions about imposter syndrome? Letting the outside disturb our insides. Yeah, that's good. Matt says, I've been out of church 1 year on Father's Day and have never been more peaceful. Violet, that's very good. A big part of my deconstruction was learning how to trust my own inner voice over authority. That's a tough one. Stop quoting the Book of Lies. Read the original writings, especially the middle books. I'm not sure who that's to. I was never good enough in the eye in church as a pastor's wife. That would be tough. Thank you for the follow. Oh, Rosie, are you here? You already had to block somebody? All right, I'm going to go ahead and lots of questions today. I'm going to go ahead and see if see about another question. Thank you. I love my numbers. Thank you. We have another question. Oh, this is a good one. Spirituality versus religion. Can you explain the difference? I think this is really important because people will sometimes say to me, are you religious? Or they'll say, Rev Karla, you're one of the most religious people I know. And I want to go, can I just stop you there for a minute? Can I just stop you there for a minute? Because there is a difference between being spiritual and being religious. But the reason that we use them interchangeably is because so many of us have come to experience some of the words that we only found in church. And the way those were used in church was interchangeably. So when you come out of that indoctrination, sometimes you begin to think that the only place those words are valid is if they're connected to church. So if we start with just a basic understanding of organized religion, and organized religion being this framework or construct of how, and I always say this in its purest form, it should be a conduit to help you nurture your spirituality, your human connection, help us elevate the human condition so that we're all better versions of ourselves, but we're also not turning away from the pain in the world. There should be some element of physical connection beyond just mission trips. Please don't get me started about that. So that's how I defined organized religion. So things that are around religion, whether it's ceremony, how you worship, how you find your spiritual community, because the things that you find inside that organized religion resonate with you. They resonate with you because you like the music, You like the people. You like the worship style. You like the rituals around significant holidays of the year. You like those things, and that's how you find your connection. Spirituality is much more personal, and it's less definable by, again, this is my definition, by organized religion. A high control organized religion would say, no, that's not true. You must check off the boxes that how we define spirituality in order for you to be the good Christian, to be the good church member, to be compliant and submissive. In other words, we're going to hijack your inner self and everything about you, your inner, your well-being, everything. We're going to hijack it all and tell you what you're going to believe, how you're going to show up, who you're going to communicate with, how you're going to worship, how you're going to relate to the outside world. We're going to teach you all of those things and demand and mandate how you relate to people in your lives. So a good example of that is Dance with the Devil, the Netflix documentary, where you see people extracting themselves from their family and their friends and things like that, because high control cult, whether you want to call them a cult or cult-like behavior, will demand how you are relating to people outside, because people outside are a threat. If they're in your head telling you that you're in a cult, then it might click someday that you actually understand that you're in a cult. And not to call every high control religion a cult, but they use cult-like manipulative tactics in order to keep their church members compliant. Now back to spirituality. Spirituality is something that, like I said, it's less definable, but it's something that is just about your inner knowing. And I don't make any preconceived notions that you have to believe in any kind of deity, or you have to believe in some of the dogma that may have been part of your religious experience or some of your religious teachings in order to be a spiritual person. I believe my spirituality is enriched by how I show up in the world, my human connection, my bonds with people. The fact that I feel very committed to trying to leave a legacy of kindness. Like I said in my ordination vows, I vow to be a goddess of kindness and a warrior for justice. And that very much is focused on the physical plane of the world. Because if my religious beliefs compel me to look to my salvation and what's going to happen when I get to heaven, then I get to ignore what's happening here. I become complacent to the pain of the world. That again can be another tactic that's used in organized religion, when I'm focusing on salvation, and then the long-suffering Christian or the long-suffering believer is actually something that's attractive, because I know my pain and suffering will end when I'm in heaven. But then that minimizes a person's ability to hold on to their spirituality, their individual growth, their individual nurturing. What do you need? What has been your touch points? What's been your trauma? What's been your pain in the world? What has happened to you that has caused you suffering? How can we help you find answers to some of those questions to heal some of those wounds? Again, in a high control religion, all of that gets minimized. I mean, how many of us heard you don't need Jesus? I mean, you don't need Prozac, you need Jesus, right? Because mental well-being is minimized. So I often say this too: the higher control organized religion is, the higher the experience is, the higher control the experience is, the less emphasis and more at risk is your mental your mental and emotional well-being, because it's going to be minimized. It's going to be cast aside in order for you to focus on the good of the hierarchical, religious, patriarchal structure. So that's why you can be spiritual without religion. You can be spiritual inside religion, but spirituality is less about what you believe and more about who you are. That's why when people ask me, well, what do you believe about God? What do you believe about Jesus? I'm not going to sit here and evangelize any of that. I can tell you that I've completely deconstructed from the patriarchal, anthropomorphized, gray-haired God sitting up in a chair, zapping me a parking space because I prayed for it, or that my sports team wins. There's part of me that is embarrassed that I ever believed that stuff. I don't know what the heavenly veil is like. I don't know any of that. So if I don't know what that is, but yet I want to do the best good that I can while I'm here, then that is my spiritual path. That's my spiritual truth. And if I can help you deconstruct from some of that rigid dogma that suffocated you and disconnected you from the pain and suffering of the world and made you feel morally and spiritually superior, and then you can then discover other connections, then I feel like I'm doing more to enrich your spiritual journey, to help you find your spiritual truth than you ever had in church. It doesn't mean that you won't, or some people do go back to church. I'm not saying don't do that either, if that's meaningful for you. But it's this mindset that you only can believe one way when there is plenty of evidence out there to show and prove that the manuscripts have been manipulated time and time again to serve religious patriarchy. And who is harmed by that kind of structure? The people without a voice, the historically oppressed. And that's exactly what's at work inside Christian nationalism. That's why nobody's going to be safe in that kind of structure. That's a whole other point. Yes, Stop Views, it's beautiful here today too. Was there anything else I needed to answer there? I saw, Mrs. Mag says, I messed up from purity culture. Oh, that's a tough one. That goes back to some of the conversation that we were having about self-worth and, imposter syndrome. That will show up if you start to actually feel liberated from some of those teachings on purity culture, and you start to want to show yourself authentically, and you want to start living in a more liberated way, you absolutely will find places where those indoctrinated beliefs will pop up, and you'll say, you're not worthy. How dare you? You're being a heathen. All those things will come up. So that is where you work on peeling those beliefs away, so that when they show up, because it's not if, when they show up, no. I'm a good person. I'm so much more than what my beliefs said I was. I no longer identify with those beliefs, and I'm going to work now to let those go, so that when I'm living my best life and I'm showing up authentically, I'm not going to let that voice in my head stop me, because I no longer recognize that person anymore, and this is who I am. And I have a right to be who I am because I am a good person. View says, for me, it took almost 20 years to unlearn the automatic self-abuse of purity culture. Absolutely. Miss Mag says, mine is mostly about my body. My father is a licensed minister. Many women have had that kind of experience. I'm going to grab another question here. Oh, so this goes along with what we were talking about with spirituality and um, religion. Someone asked, "Can we have spirituality without a deity?" Hang on just a second. It goes along. Can we have spirituality without a deity? It goes along with our conversation about being. What's the difference between spirituality and religion? Yeah, and that kind of question, we're always looking like, are we doing this right? Are we out here doing this right? You will never get approval from the church. You're never going to get that from your churched experience. Now, again, please, nobody put in not all Christians. Please don't tell me. I know there are progressive churches. I know there's very much churches out there who have that experience. So that's not what we're talking about. We are all deconstructing from some kind of high control, evangelical, fundamentalist, conservative experience. But from that experience, no one's going to ever approve of you having a spirituality independent of that belief, that framework of that belief. No one's ever going to believe that. Oh, yeah, Salt's mom. That's a good one. Worst church practice was the beginning of service. Raise your hand if you led someone to the Lord. Yeah. So the short answer is, can we have spirituality without a deity? Yes. Thank you for the gifts. Yes. Yes. I don't know if you've caught some of the things that I've said before, because I released that patriarchal, anthropomorphized, vengeful God. I'm searching for the mystery of there's something, and I always say I'm not giving up on the mystery of spirituality, because there's so much that's unexplainable to me. There's so much that's happened in my life and that I've witnessed and I've heard from other people, that the unexplainable calls me forward. But I don't have to call that God. I don't know who or what God is. And I'm at peace with that. Because when I was in a rigid faith that forced me to believe what God was, I may have been thinking I was a kind person, but I was a judgmental, closed-minded person. I felt I was morally and spiritually superior than other people. I don't want to be that person anymore. So I would rather live with the questions. And if that's enough to just move me forward in life towards those questions that I may never get answered, I don't think we ever will. I don't think we ever will. I don't think we will understand completely how this whole creation chaos became what we are now. It started with something even before the Big Bang and even before evolution, which I believe in. So where did it all begin? And if that's all, that question is part of my faith, my spiritual journey, then that's enough. But I'm not going to ever tell somebody that they have to believe a certain way to be saved or to be a good person. I don't believe that. Thanks, Lynette. What's the question? Oh gosh, I think I see it coming. Who is this? Kendra? How do you approach resentful feelings? I'm waiting for the question to be typed. How do you approach resentful feelings towards people who indoctrinated or harmed you when it wasn't malicious? Lynette, is that the question? Are you all, or are you going on to the next one? I'm just looking at some information I'm getting from my mods, and we have some fake accounts of mine. They're showing up in my live, and I think you know that they're out there. I want to repeat something I've said time and again, and I'll make a video about this at some point. We have 3 accounts. Rev Karla Shop, which you see here inside. Rev Karla, is it revkarla.too, I think is what it is. Let me see. I forget my own accounts. And this one, Rev Karla. But what happens is we have people, they make accounts, they make it look like me, they steal some of my content, and then they go and they follow you back, my followers back, and then they solicit readings. And some of these accounts have thousands of followers. They have more followers than I do on my backup account. And then they ask you, they'll tell you that I got good energy from you, and they get people's money. And then these people come to me and ask me for their money back. And I don't have your money. I don't have your money. I'm not asking anybody for readings. I've never ever done that. And I'm sorry that people get scammed by this. We try to work with TikTok to get them take it down, but actually the process is exhausting. And they've now created so many multiple steps for us to prove that it's not us, that they've made it very easy for these scam accounts to exist without much repercussions. So outside of making our content copyrightable, which then prevents things from being shared, so it gets really complicated. But it really is about buyer beware. And there are some huge accounts who aren't even trying anymore. I mean, if you go look at some of the bigger accounts, and then they'll have hundreds of fake accounts that are in there because people don't pay attention to who they're following. And then their video just comes up on your FYP and you think you're following that creator. So it really is about buyer beware. Know the usernames of the people that you're following. But what we're noticing is they're coming in here, they're seeing the people who are in the lives, and then they're going out and following you to get your money. So make sure that you follow and pay attention. Yeah, that Sherry Love, yes, that's who we just caught being in here. Simple Path Witchery is in here trying to get people to follow them. And that's a fake account. That is a fake account. Simple Path Witchery is a fake account. Thank you, RY6. Y'all, we need to get to church. Wherever RY6 is, we need to go. Yeah, Wings of a Magpie, it's really hard. It really is hard. All right, I want to get to Kendra's question. How do you approach resentful feelings towards people who indoctrinated or harmed you when it wasn't malicious? So a lot of times, hang on just a second. There's a Rev Karla 2 without the dot. Is that a fake account? Gosh, that's crazy because I'm on the Rev Karla. Hold on just a second. Yeah, it has to be a fake account because mine is revkarla.too. So yeah, it's a fake account. I wish there was more we could do. There's just not. I'm sorry. Yeah, without the dot is a fake. Okay, maybe I could put that on the screen, what our accounts are. We could also create a green screen with those on there. Thank you, Sherry. I'm glad you're here. All right, once again, the question. Let's try to get to this question. Brian. Oh, Brian, you're good. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, this is the real account. It's really me, Aaron. It's really me. This is the real account. You know what? They'll do that sometime. They'll probably figure out how to simulcast or do something weird. Ugh. It's getting bad. And like I said, they make it impossible for you to report, even though they make it sound like it's super simple. It isn't. All right. I'm serious. We're going to answer this question. How do you approach resentful feelings towards people who indoctrinated or harmed you when it wasn't malicious? Well, it wasn't malicious because they didn't know they were part of the indoctrination. Most people who are in that indoctrination or in some kind of cult don't know they are. They don't know they've been manipulated. I mean, inside these fundamentalist churches, they encourage you to be spoon-fed from the pulpit. I know that's an insulting way to say it, but I'm talking about my own experience. They did not want you to sit down and actually read the Bible. What they wanted you to do was to be piecemeal the Bible through their translations and interpretation of scripture that they then would preach to you. So you would gobble that down and you'd have that story, and then that's what you would use as your weaponized belief to judge the world. So when that is your existence, that is your identity, that is who you are, you think you are being a good Christian by gobbling all this stuff down and then using that to go back to your life, and now you're dealing with this weaponized faith. You've put on the armor of God and you're out there judging your entire community. Anybody that you come in touch with, that's where the people who'll say, well, love the sinner, hate the sin. God loves you. We're all sinners. And that stuff cuts to the core, especially when it's somebody who you adore, who's raised you. So yeah, that hurts. But in their mind, they're not doing anything wrong. Just like I said, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong when I was a Southern Baptist spewing this stuff. I thought I was actually helping people. If they could come to Jesus and just knew the truth, just come to church and knew the truth, then you would get saved. And I would get a star in my crown for getting you to come to church. So letting that resentment go is part of the deconstructing process. A lot of times the resentment comes from a couple of places. When we have started to pull away and we start to see the indoctrination for what it is and how much it's harmed us, how much it's limited our lived experience, how much we have been deceived by what life should be like, that not just necessarily submitting and obedient to this religious patriarchal structure. There's resentment for time wasted in your life because you realize that your life would look entirely different had you not been beholden to a system that had you focusing on perpetuating the system. And that meant that you were regurgitating those teachings to other people because you felt obligated to have people fill the pews. You felt obligated to tithe. More than likely, you were giving money to the church at a level that actually wasn't even putting your financial well-being at risk, because that's what you were taught. So you start to have some resentment about that, and you can't help but have resentment towards other people. And being able to identify the fact that I'm carrying resentment, it is actually a healthy part of your deconstructing. It's holding on to it that we have to be careful about, because those kinds of recognizing that you have these emotions that you more than likely have been indoctrinated to ignore. We have no right to be angry. We have no right to that. We have no right for accountability. We were taught that time and time again. The church leaders were flawless. If they were the chosen ones, then we don't have any right to question their authority or anything. And then that kind of patriarchal structure actually carried over into our lives, whether it was in our family or whether it was in our educational experience, in our civic or social structures. It was all over the place. We were supposed to be submissive to and obedient to a system that we didn't quite understand and most likely didn't agree with, but didn't think that we had a voice. So when you start to validate those feelings, it's going to feel loud. And sometimes it's going to feel out of control because you don't know what to do with all this. So let that rage come out. Let it come out in a healthy way that helps you find your voice and establish yourself and regulate yourself and move towards your healing. The only mistake that when we recognize rage for what it is and the resentment that we're holding on to is when we feel like we have to hold on to it in order to validate who we are. It feels more comfortable to hold on to that rage, that resentment. That will limit our healing. That will limit our ability to heal from those experiences, move back to our world, our own lived experiences, a better version of ourselves. That's why we want to heal from that. We're going to empower ourselves to live beyond the things that harmed us. But if we hold on to some of that resentment and that bitterness and that anger, then it's controlling us. And that doesn't mean you don't tell your story. It doesn't mean that you ignore the anger or the bitterness. It doesn't mean that you don't have the right to work through it. How many times have you seen one of the people who comes in here and drops Christ is King, or she's a heretic, don't listen to her, or whatever else they say? I say with a smile because obviously it doesn't bother me. How many times have you also seen people in here say, why are you so angry? You must be so, why are you so obsessed with what happened in church? Why can't you just let that go? Telling your story is your right. Helping people, finding your people who have had similar experiences, that's scary to them. They're trying to control your narrative. They're trying to control how we're going to heal. And they want to gatekeep that. There are mega pastors out there right now writing books on deconstructing. They are mega pastors. There's an article, I think it's in Christianity Today, from a mega pastor telling people how to deconstruct, as long as it points you back to Jesus. As long as it points you back to Jesus, go ahead and deconstruct. Hey, I deconstructed, says the pastor in jeans. Oh my gosh. I'm telling you, these churches are branding masters. And I mean, probably 10 years ago, that would have triggered me to find out that they're that kind of deceptive marketing practices. But when you see them for what they are, that's not anger, but I can also still use my voice. But because I use my voice to call it out, they'll say, "My, you're angry." No, I'm empowered. I'm empowered. I took the steps through my own anger and bitterness. I took those steps through that experience to a point where I now can help others do the same. And the fact that you're here asking about resentment and holding on to that resentment, you are recognizing the fact that you have it. That's the first step in letting it go. That's a huge step. Some people can't even, your emotions have been so mired up inside you because we've been taught to just suffocate them and not acknowledge them, that when you're finally able to start extract them and pull them apart, then you can say, yeah, this one's about resentment. That's what I need to work on today. And so when it won't happen overnight, but when you can see that you are a remnant of what you used to be, and they still are, but you're moving beyond it. You've moved beyond it. You're on a healing journey. So what do I need to let that go? What's going to be the process to let that go? So working through maybe some of your own guilt. That's the first thing. Always internalize it. Where did that kind of weaponization of those kinds of indoctrinated beliefs that maybe you used to weaponize your faith, to judge others, start with that. Start there, and then start to look at the specific things. This is where I hope everybody has a deconstructing journal that you're using out there. And you start, if writing isn't it, then open up a tab on your computer and just go at it and start writing this stuff down. But think about specific things where you know what was being said or what was being done wasn't right. That wasn't right. And you're more than likely not going to get resolution by turning back and asking anything, because they're still going to be indoctrinated in that. Are those people who are still sitting in the pews are obedient to it? We can never look back at the abuse, the harm, the trauma, and expect resolution, because oftentimes we're the defiant, we're the lost. So we find it by going forward and working on our own release and healing. And that is where we also learn to redefine what forgiveness means, because again, that's a whole other thing where inside the church we were taught one thing, but it really is an empowering process that allows us to move beyond the pain that others meant for harm. And even though those are deep wounds that we carry with us, once we start to heal from those, we become a much stronger version of ourselves. And I'm not saying that, I'll never mean that God meant it for good for any of us to be harmed by some of the things that happened to us, but they did happen to us. And if we then allow them to hijack our joy and our experience and our ability to live beyond it, then they've won. They've won. So for many, that means some kind of spiritual care or guidance, intense therapy, group support. Many people are finding that kind of help in these kinds of virtual communities as well, where we're here answering questions. Now that does not ever take the place of licensed mental therapy, if that is something that you feel like you have, especially if you feel like you've experienced any kind of trauma. So I feel like I have to say that as well. I've got some people here. What are you doing here? Are you here?
I am.
Hi, how are you feeling?
I'm getting better every day. I am at a lull right now where I was at a big energy boost. I was doing all sorts of stuff, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. But I was listening, and I had a question for you.
Sure.
One of the things I had a problem with, and you were talking about forgiveness, is almost the weaponizing of forgiveness. And I saw a young man on TikTok yesterday, and it was in one of the, posts it was some ultra evangelical church saying, and the young woman was saying, well, you need a misogynistic man to make all your decisions for you. And later in the clip, he said, well, if you were doing this, and he mentioned all of these terrible things he would do to her. He would curse her out, he would belittle her, he would do this, that, he might hit her. And he goes, and then I'd repent. But it's like, well, it seems almost like, well, you planned to be evil, and then you just went, oh, well, I'll just have my ticket to say, I'm sorry, I repent, you have to forgive me. And I don't know, I've had a lot of people demand forgiveness. And it's like, that's for me to do.
Absolutely. All right. So first of all, you look amazing. I'm glad you're feeling better. The smile says it all. I can tell you're rested and you feel so much better. I'm glad you're home and resting. I'm sure your pets are glad you're home as well. So in the church, we're taught, especially inside a high religious patriarchal structure, and you're talking about that's the majority of churches. I mean, I even saw that, experienced it inside of some of my progressive church experiences, where the patriarchal structure ensures that there is less accountability for the man, the white Christian man at the top. That is going to trickle down into the man experience. So if we just look at the recent, I'm getting ready to edit a video where I'm talking about 2 years ago, it was all over this app where there was a pastor here in Indiana who got up to spin the story that he was going to confess to his congregation that he had an affair. And boy, was he spinning it, that he was asking for forgiveness. Well, the woman gets up to say, this was not an affair. I was 16.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, and so I'm drawing a bridge to, I don't know if you've watched Dance with the Devil on Netflix. So this is about...
I don't have Netflix right now.
Okay, so this is, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen this, but it's about Shekinah Church, and there's going to be a whole thing come out about SA inside that church, where the pastor gets up and says, I was seduced. With countless women, I was seduced. I'm only a man. I am asking you forgiveness. That last thing he said was enough for most of the congregation to sit compliant and say nothing and stay in the church. And then you see what just happened with Donald Trump being convicted of 34 counts. Now he's a convicted felon. Out comes this song that he's the chosen one. They show all the stupid things in the video that he has done. And but they say he's the chosen one. This is the patriarchal narrative that says that all the man has to do is ask for forgiveness, which is translated in our indoctrinated mind as demanding it, so that they're absolved from behavior that they already knew they were going to do. And this lineage of patriarchy that starts with the ordained pastor who is the chosen by God, and then the lineage of the man then passes down into the man who can say, you have to give me forgiveness because I have asked for it.
Right, and I'm forgiven.
And then the victim then has to suffer in silence, when in reality, forgiveness is an empowerment. It's an empowerment process. It's a healing process. It's never about restoration of relationship. It could lead to that, but it's never about restoration of relationship. It's about giving the victim the space that they need to heal the wound and see what they need as they move forward in their life. Now, sadly, what that also means is if it's in a situation where they share a household, how is the victim going to be able to be protected? Sometimes it's financially impossible. And if they're both indoctrinated into that structure, she doesn't feel like she has the voice or the right, or the victim, because it could be children, it could be who knows. So this continues to perpetuate itself. And then the victim and this is what's really scary about this statistic that the church also knows, is that a person who's been indoctrinated into this concept of forgiveness, who more than likely is carrying some kind of abuse, is 10 times, I can't remember the exact number. Well, there's a high percentage that they're more likely to be abused again.
Yeah.
So it's important to keep those people inside the structure of that patriarchal institution, because that's how they perpetuate it. They're going to keep tithing, and they're going to be more loyal, because then you have this unhealthy, warped relationship with your abuser that's linked to your fatherly structure, that's linked to your love for your spouse. I mean, it is so messed up and convoluted, but you're seeing it play out in real time in this documentary from Dancing with the Devil, which is about the TikTok dance club right here. That it's very disturbing, to Donald Trump, to this pastor 2 years ago. It just goes on and on and on. So they know they're going to get by with it, because all they have to do is ask for salvation. You saw it in the Ashley Madison documentary too. Yes, I watched it. That
was one problem I had as a child. I remember asking my mom about that, because I went to Sunday school always, and I don't think I had the best Sunday school teachers, but they talked about, it was something about, that Jesus had died for your sins, and all you have to do is repent and you'll go to heaven. And I went, oh, I said to my mom, I was like, everyone? And she was like, yeah. Well, she had, The Hiding Place by Corrie Ten Boom had come out when I was like 10 years old. And our church had gone to see it. So that was my first introduction to the Holocaust. And my mom read the book to us first, and then we saw the movie. And I looked at her and I said, so Adolf Hitler could do that? Like 2 seconds before he died? And she didn't really have a good answer for that either. And I was like, to me, that doesn't make any sense, because I would think it would, in an afterlife, whichever you believe in, if it's a place of paradise or punishment, it would be based on the deeds that you've done during your life, not on a well, what do I want to say, a loophole.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
There's another interesting aspect of that story about Corrie Ten Boom, which I always bring up as well. She defied authority to save people.
Absolutely.
So she's as far as Christians are concerned, she's a saint. But yet, in order for her to save people, she defied the authority. So the very people who talk us about being law abiding, there are times when you're not, in order to move past, in order to defy corruption, to protect the innocent. And so, the whole thing becomes so hypocritical in how you contort scripture and the way whatever you will do to protect that patriarchal structure. So yeah, it gets crazy. But the whole thing about forgiveness, I think that's been one of the hardest things when I was offering spiritual care for people, working through that, when they would be like, well, I know I have to forgive. I have to go to my family's gathering, even though my uncle SA'd me, because I have to forgive him. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have, if that is not a safe space for you and your family's not acknowledging the harm that's been done, you do not have to be that's not what forgiveness is at all.
Yeah.
Suffering in silence is something that patriarchy teaches us to benefit the patriarchy.
Right.
So thank you for that. Thank you for allowing me to preach
another thing with Corrie Ten Boom. One of the people that she was hiding was a rabbi whose name was Yussi, and she said, I think her sister went to the market, and they had lied about how many ration stamps they needed. They had said they needed 100, so they had 100 ration stamps. I don't know how they managed that, but they hardly ever got meat. The meat ration in Holland per week was about the size of a matchbox. And they had a pork roast, and her sister bought it and brought it home and cooked it, and they all sat down to dinner, and here is this rabbi sitting down to dinner, and they're serving this giant pork roast. And they sat down, and Yussi looked at them and looked at the meat, and he said, I'm sure there's a very good reason in the Torah that I should not be eating this. He said, and right after dinner, I'm going to go look for it. But actually, there are the Levitical laws in there, if you pay attention, that does say that you preserve life over everything. So not everything is so black and white. That when people start weaponizing parts of the Bible and using you've got a literal translation. Well, there isn't any literal translation right now.
No, none. No. None. I talk a lot about that too, because especially in my experience, it was the King James Version was the only translation. And then the interpretation that only the church leaders told us how to interpret the scripture. And deconstructing from that was so hard. I mean, Rosie, and this is Pride Month, so I'm going to tell this story. You're going to find this I don't know how you're going to find this. I hope you still love me after I tell this
I love
story.
you.
All right, so I deconstructed. I left high control evangelical Christianity. I was looking for, but I was still trying to find answers inside the church. I still thought I was going to find a place for me. So I was driving like an hour to go to this church. And I was so happy because the pastor was gay, and but this was before they could be legally married. So I was surrounded by so many people who could just show up authentically. Now get this, I had been going there for several months, and they announced that the church was having a camping weekend. Now listen to you talk about those hidden indoctrination. And I was like, well, how are they going to do that? They're not married. I just, I could feel. Did you ever watch Star Trek?
Yes.
Okay, so the one where they had those blonde robots, and James Kirk said to them, "You can tell when I'm lying. By the way, I'm lying," and their heads blew off. That's what I felt my brain was doing. Like I could not compute. Like, how are you going to invite all these people to go? But they're not married. Are they going to be sleeping together? What are they going to? And I mean, my head could not compute that this was going to be okay. And it took me. It's like I knew I was coming face to face with an indoctrinated belief about marriage
Mm-hmm.
and purity culture that I didn't even know was there until it was hitting me right in the eyes. And I sat there going, well, they can't, my God, they can't. They're living their lives. They can't. Our government, you know, I'm glad I was able to work it out on my own, but I'm glad I didn't go, are there going to be separate dorms? Because I just couldn't compute it.
I'd only want to sleep in the dorm where the people who didn't snore slept.
Oh God, well, we wouldn't be able to sleep in the same dorm. But then I was embarrassed. Like, oh my God, I got so much work to do. I have so much work to do from deconstruct. And I bawled. I cried all the way home, realizing what this indoctrination had done to me and how disconnected I was from the suffering in the world and the pain of the world, because that's something I took for granted because of this position of privilege, and that people were denied, but this church was celebrating out loud and proud, and I was the one who could not connect with it. Now in the end, the drive was not sustainable, but in the end I also realized, like I say in the book, this spirituality, I was putting God in this box, and the box was too small. And then I just deconstructed God altogether. So it just kept going.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you for answering the question about, I think forgiveness is a very interesting concept and a very interesting path, you know. And I think there's also, like I had an issue with a friend, and it was bad, and I broke off ties with her. And then a few years later, she came back with a big apology. But I had really seen what type of person she was. So, you know, if given the chance to either stand up for a friend or throw you under the bus, she instantly threw you under the bus.
Oh.
And I said, I accept your apology, but I do not want to be your friend.
Yeah.
You know, and to me, that was okay. I was like, and I wasn't nasty to her, but it was like I accepted her apology. It's water under the bridge, but I don't then have to go the next step and go, oh, I'm going to be best friends with you again. No, I'm not.
Yeah. That's the empowerment part. That's it, where the indoctrination said you do. I brought Poetic up because...
Yeah, I'm going to have to drop because I have a video I have to finish.
Bye, dear. Thank you so
hello,
much.
Poetic. I love you.
Bye.
Love you too, friend. Take care.
Hi, Poetic. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me in your space. I appreciate you letting me up for a little bit.
Yeah, you are very, very welcome. What's your question?
Forgiveness has been something that I tagged you in a post when I heard you talking about it briefly
I'm
before,
sorry I
just a
didn't see
couple.
it.
No, it was just a couple minutes ago. You're still on the
Oh,
live,
okay.
and I I after deconstructing my lived experience in the Christian church, raised in the church, and all of that, and kind of getting to the place where I'm starting to digest or chew on the concept of something still being out there that's bigger than me. Um, Forgiveness was always something that I had always felt was weaponized against me in the church. And so looking back, people who asked me or approached me for forgiveness, um, I I came to the conclusion that many of those people weren't asking for my forgiveness. They were asking for my acceptance. They were asking for me to accept the things that they had done wrong to me. And mostly because there was no desire for corrective action. And well, if you love Jesus, if you want to go to heaven, you have to forgive me, which means continuing to give me access, which means
Ooh.
allowing me to be in your space to continue this. And I just um via your content, which I love and I follow you, I'd really value just some input on what you think about that.
Well, thank you for, first of all, thank you, because that is powerful. That not sure, I'd have to go back and look at my own teachings and writings if I said it that succinctly, but I don't think I have, Poetic, where you said what they were really asking for was acceptance. And in a way, it's so implied in the indoctrination that you don't have a choice. And that's why when I saw there were two things this week that came up for me where I saw somebody do a post on another social media platform that was talking about Trump's relationships with women and how the narrative has been spun that he was a victim in every one of them. That even though we've talked about the affairs and the convictions from this Stormy Daniels situation, that he was the victim in all of them. And when you watch this documentary on Netflix about the Shekinah Church and the pastor being accused of SA of several members, and him saying that he's only a human and he's asking for forgiveness, you're absolutely right that there's no asking. They may be saying those words, but it is implied that you will give it. It's an acceptance. You will go, even if, for so many of us that were indoctrinated into that experience, you didn't have a voice. You didn't have a right to push back. The situation in 2022 with the pastor here in Indiana, where he was trying to spin it as an affair, and she got up and said, "No, I was 16. This was abuse." At the end, she and her husband walk away alone while almost the entire congregation gets up and surrounds the pastor to pray with him because he confessed and asked for forgiveness. Now, since then, I think a lot came out about that pastor, and the victim had gotten a lot of support. But on that moment, the indoctrination was on full display on what that is. So we are all carrying, those of us who were indoctrinated in that, not all of us here, are carrying around a warped perception of what forgiveness is. And until we work through that, we will continue to swallow down pain that isn't ours to carry. And the most important thing to do is to reclaim our lives and establish boundaries in a way that we can trust those in our inner circles, that they will take care of us. And that doesn't mean people don't make mistakes. That there's difference between intentional harm, mistakes, and recklessness that defies the sanctity of relationships, that then they expect that they have no accountability whatsoever. No accountability. Forgiveness in and of itself is much more, it's never performative, and it's much more than just a statement. So I appreciate the way you explained it and your experience, and I'll look forward to seeing your video. Thank you so much for that, Poetic.
Yes, I wanted to just add one more thing, and I won't take up too much space on your panel, but in because of the upbringing that I had in church, one of the things that I guess I'm still kind of chewing on and figuring out a way to get through, because as you said earlier on the live, like forgiveness, it's really a healing process for the person that had this thing perpetuated against them, and but I never there are situations that I'm still navigating where it was hard to heal from those situations because I never had autonomy or a real choice not to forgive the person who perpetuated those things against me. And, and I see the value in forgiving and moving on and, doing the things that I need to on my end, but just having autonomy and the choice, and if I choose not to forgive, that being something that is my right to choose, if I choose that. And it's just something that I had to start there, like embracing that autonomy just to be able to honestly forgive
I
some of
love
the things
that.
that were done to me.
Embracing the autonomy, embracing the rights, our
Yeah.
rights. This is a really good. I talk when I talk about deconstructing. I don't know that I've ever talked about it here in this live, so this may be something new for people. But when you're talking about deconstructing, perhaps establishing a code of ethics, a personal code of ethics that we learn to live by, because our ethics were defined by somebody else for us. And so when we take ownership of what those ethics are and how we're going to establish the boundaries, how do we use our voice? How do we show up in the world? What is the value? How will I know that I'm showing up with integrity? And what do I want people to know of me? What do I want? What is the message I want to leave the world? How do I want to leave the world a better place than I found it? So creating those codes of ethics can help us, and it certainly can help around when we start getting to these teachings that really truly harmed us. So Poetic, thank you so much.
Yes.
I'm going to bring.
I'm gonna hop down. I'm not gonna take up any more time in your space, but thank you for having me up, Rev Karla.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's been an honor. Thank you so very much. And I think I have someone else. Hey, Dob Views, how are you?
Oh, sorry. Hold on a second.
That's okay. You've been waiting a long time. Thank you so much.
I started watering flowers. My bad.
That's okay. You waited a long time, so I appreciate you. And I wanted to see, did you have a question or a comment?
This was concerning the person earlier who wanted to know how to learn how to forgive. And for me, I'm 46. I started my journey deconstructing when I was 14, 15, 16 years old. By the time I hit 18 to 20 was when I started working with my best friend's two young girls. And there were things that were going on during that time in their lives, and I'm not going to get into that. But for me, one of them came up to me when she was probably 12 or 13, and she said, "I don't understand why my mother doesn't love me." And I heard myself say that exact same thing when I was her age. And so I thought about it for a second, and then I came back to her later on. I was like, "Honey, it's not the fact that your mother doesn't love you. She just doesn't know how to show it. She's sick right now. Maybe someday she can, but right now she just can't do that for you. Mm-hmm. And me answering her was also me answering my own inner child. So I would tell them to address their inner child if, when, and at all possible, to do it over and over and over again. And that is not only your child as your younger self in between 18 and below, but your mental inner child, because that can be, you can be 100 and still be talking to your inner child from when you were 98 years old.
Oh my goodness. So true. And that is, when we recognize how much the inner child is still influencing us and we accept it and we embrace it, that is a big part of our healing journey. There is a therapist here, Patrick Tehan, T-A-H-A-N. I'm going to be speaking at one of his groups later this month, I think. That does a lot about, talks a lot about inner child. And so please go find their account. They're here and they're on other platforms as well. So it's definitely worth looking at that. Dob Views, I'm going to go ahead and drop you. I've got one more person and I'm going to have
Thanks,
to.
hon.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. Thank you so much.
Where's the?
I think I got it.
Hello.
Hi.
How you doing? I was going to ask you a question, but you pretty much answered it.
Okay.
Poetic. You said, I was going to ask you what exactly is forgiveness. And you said so profoundly, you said forgiveness is not performative. So I'm thinking you mean more is more introspective and working through the trauma that you've been through and decide whether or not you can move on from that without that person or the hurt dominating your direction in your life.
Yeah. You're very right. And I think I was directing that we have the right. There's two ways to look at this, and both ways are complicated. And both of how we view forgiveness can be impacted by that same indoctrination. So when I was thinking, and so thank you for what you said, because when I was saying forgiveness isn't performative, I was thinking about the offender doing things that may look at all the wonderful things I'm doing for you. You should, as Poetic said, you should accept me. You should accept me back into your life because of all these things I'm doing to show you that I'm worthy of forgiveness. But you're right about that as well. When you're talking about forgiveness, we should know what we want. So that does go back to that code of ethics to say what kind of person do we want in our lives? And that same indoctrination may still be in our head where we think we don't have the right to that. That there's so many people that are in our inner circle that do not have our best interests. They have you in, they're in there, they've infiltrated too close to our inner selves so that we are to remain compliant to whatever system, a patriarchal system that serves the highest person at the top. And so in religious patriarchy, we're primarily talking about the white Christian man, but this goes into our family structures and our educational structures as well. So any one of those, we then, if we have people in our inner circle who have no right being there, who do not have our best interest, who could care less about our well-being, but are there for their own self-interest or part of to keep you compliant to the system, there's no way we're going to be able to use discernment and be able to distract from the noise of that indoctrination to find out what we want, who we are and what we deserve in our lives. So that's a really good point, Big Perm. Thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and drop you down because I'm going to have to call it a day. I've got some things going on, but please come back and see me sometimes.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, take care. All right, everyone. Thank you so very much. I do have on June 11th, 6 p.m., I'm teaching It Is Well With My Soul. This is a conversation about navigating the pathways of grief. So that's a whole other thing about indoctrination, because what we're taught about our self-worth, about forgiveness, but also what it means to grieve. So often when I would be in spiritual care with somebody, we always got to a place where someone was holding unprocessed grief because our feelings aren't valid. Our pain isn't valid. So when we understand that not only are we changed by the loss that we carry, how can we understand that carrying that loss with us is part of the human experience, and your loss is valid, your pain is valid. So this is a tender teaching, but it's one that I feel is really important. So this is a series of workshops that I do called Sacred Conversations, and I hold these live teachings a couple of times a month, and you can find them where you see my face. I think it's in my link tree. I can say that. I think so. Don't forget, my book is in pre-order, Deconstructing, Leaving Church, Finding Faith. Pre-orders certainly help in that world, so I really appreciate it if you have not done that. So yet I will be back here Monday at noon Eastern time, and we'll continue our conversation. And let's see, do I have, make sure you follow the backup accounts at Rev Karla Shop and revkarla.too. Please make sure you do that. And I think that's all I have for today. Beautiful souls, thank you so much. It's, as always, it's an honor to hold this space with you. Such wonderful conversations. I can just feel this is where the healing begins, because you are reclaiming your spirituality and identifying the places where the harm has been done, but you are reclaiming your lives. And I'm so, so proud of you and so honored to be in this space with you. For now, make it a good day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye for now.